We'll let Manjula explain Cisco's vision. I think she's much more qualified to do that than I am. So please welcome Manjula Talreja.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. A real pleasure being here today. I was speaking last year as well at Cloud Expo in New York, and it's always a pleasure coming to New York, being from Silicon Valley, and seeing different flavors. Before I get started, I'd like you to hear a video. It's a combination of John Chambers, who's the chairman of our board, and one of my close colleagues, Joseph Bradley, talk about Internet of Everything, and then I'll get started to explain what they're really talking about. So let's start the video.
We are at the tipping point. The effect of the first 25 years of the Internet will be magnified 5 to 10 times in the next decade. It is the vehicle which will allow you to address almost every problem that exists in the world.
Where we are today is we have episodes or instances of dramatic change, but we're just seeing the beginning of it. What happens when all of the knowledge of humankind is made available to every individual on the planet? That's the Internet of Everything. It's people being aware of processes, and those processes generating new data and insight that flow from things. The Internet of Everything brings these systems together. It's as if the world is going to reboot. When each of those levels of awareness increases, the number of people that are connected increases exponentially. The world becomes hyper-aware. Now we can think about things that we couldn't even think about before. I'm able to tap into resources and tap into people that I never thought was possible. That's where you really get the ability to truly change the world. The currency of the 21st century is all about insight. Every individual on this planet has something to add value. We just uncovered the key to unlock that value. That's what the Internet of Everything does.
The success of the Internet of Everything will be measured by how it changed every aspect of humanity for everyone in the world.
So, insight is today's currency, and that's what's going to bring value. So let's try and understand what is it that John Chambers and Joseph Bradley were talking about. What is the Internet of Everything? What does it mean for each of your businesses? And how are businesses preparing for it? And since I'm in New York City, I can't walk away from being that some of you, just a raise of hands of how many of you from the financial institutions, banking, etc., and retail. So I figured since I was in New York City, I should talk about those two verticals and make it real instead of just starting with concepts. And then I'm going to question you folks in terms of, are you really ready for it? Or are you not? So, Gartner calls it the nexus of forces. IDC calls it the third platform. GE calls it the industrial internet. It's about social, mobile, video, data analytics, security, and cloud coming together. At Cloud Expo, I used to talk about cloud. Now it's the conversion of cloud with all these other changes that are happening in the industry, and the convergence of that, as Gartner calls it, the nexus of forces, and we at Cisco call it the Internet of Everything. It is the digital era now. And it isn't about just big data and analytics. It's not about Internet of Things only. It's about process, people, data, and things. And I'll give you an example. Mayo Clinic says, to keep healthy, we should all walk 10,000 steps a day. I can't keep track by counting it in my head. So I wear one of these little wearable devices called the Fitbit. The Fitbit is the Internet of Things. It's a device, but by itself, it does nothing. I can't create value out of that. I'm the people. So I've got the people, I got the thing. It's the data that comes out of it at the end of the day that tells me that I probably have walked 4,000 steps only. And what do? I implement a process where for the rest of the 6,000 steps, I get on a treadmill. So think about people, process, data, and things as simple as wearing a Fitbit and how those come together. And that's where I bring the value and the opportunity to stay fit, take the dark asset called fat, and turn it into becoming lean. And I give that as humor because as a personal, but I'll get into businesses and how value needs to come out of it. How do you get value out of this? How do you monetize this? How does this impact your bottom line? I do want to introduce the next factor. It's not just about process, people, data, and things. It's about the speed at which this is happening. In 2012 alone, we had created more data than the previous 5,000 years. By 2020, we will be approximately 50 billion objects connected to the internet. 77 billion applications were downloaded during 2014. This is moving fast. This isn't about the conversions of all these subcomponents of the digital era. It's at the speed at which it is happening. So how do you drive value with speed and the convergence of all these components of the digital era, with cloud being only one of them? And we're at the Cloud Expo. And that's why we've got an IoT, we've got big data, all together in terms of a DevOps environment, which to me is really a philosophy of how you deliver some of the technology. How big is this? Value at stake. Cisco's done a big amount of work, a big body of work on defining how big is this? What is this value of Internet of Everything? And value at stake means the value to your bottom line, the opportunity of the value to the bottom line of creating new value or migrating value between industry and companies. Case in point, in the cloud era, Amazon, a book company, created value and took it away from some of the traditional players in infrastructure as a service. That's the migration of value. It had a direct impact on their bottom line and their top line. Cisco went through 61 use cases across the private sector and the public sector, use case by use case, and basically provided data to industries all over the world on how much is the value at stake of $19 trillion. 14 trillion from private sector, 4.6 trillion from public sector, use case by use case related to customer experience, asset utilization, revenue, citizen experience from a government point of view. And I'm going to get into the specifics towards the end of this presentation, more in terms of opportunity in financial institutions and retail and what they're really doing, because they are creating value. And it is imperative that each of your companies create that value, because the competitive landscape is significantly changing. New players are coming in, the over-the-top players are coming in, and it's just not traditional at a speed that we can't even comprehend. So how are businesses preparing for IoE? When connections get combined, and in order to solve the higher order business problem, there are three key vectors. Number one, machine to machine. We talk about Internet of Things. When machine to machine, whether your automobiles are connected to the internet, your homes are connected to your internet, AT&T introduced, the whole security system where there are sensors and video cameras in your home, as an example. That's machine to machine. Person to person is collaboration. I don't go into the office most of the time. I have a big video screen at my home. If I'm not traveling, I'm at my home with a big video screen communicating with the world. That's collaboration where video is playing an important role. And machine to person is where new opportunities of insights are being created and the data is being created on all aspects, as basically people are seeing data and coming up with what are the insights they're getting on whatever behavior. Google and Facebook and Amazon have a lot of it, of our personal behavior, as does Apple. And therefore, Joseph Bradley in that video said, today's currency is insights. And I'll go one step beyond. Context is king. And think about it when I talk to you about in retail industry, when an Amazon knows so much about you, has insights about you in the context of how you're doing shopping. And if we bring all of this together and go to the center of it, where the true overlaps, that's when the highest value of IU business models and innovations are occurring. I know I'm talking about concepts, but I'll bring it to reality as we go through a couple of use cases and bring it to what we'll all relate to, just like I was relating to you about how Fitbit is such an important part of what I do in terms of my exercise schedule. To capture the value, firms must apply the 4 pillars that Joseph Bradley talked about in the video, as well as I introduced: process, people, data, and things. And we as technologists quickly focus on the buzz of things alone. But as we did a study and looked at where, as we go through the use cases, where is the biggest value and change that needs to occur, it's in the people and the process. And I'll give you some examples in terms of what I mean by that. But IOE success will depend on technology innovation that is brought about by improved people and process, not just by the technology itself. And for a company like yours to become truly innovative and capture that value, got to be hyper-aware, predictive, and agile. So if I am a retail store or a grocery store like Safeway, when people come in and out and don't want to stand at a checkout counter for even the quick line that's 20 people long in the queue, I must monitor customer sentiment and behavior at the real time. At that time, when I walk into the store and lines suddenly start getting created, even though it's not 5 o'clock in the evening, because people no longer work 8 to 5, and crowds can walk into a grocery store at any time. That whole algorithm that grocery stores used to have in the past has to be put out and they have to become hyper-aware. Predictive. Optimize performance of assets and operations in real time. And agile, move fast. Basically, companies have to foster disruptive innovations, build platforms for sustainable advantage. That is extremely agile. All companies that are capturing value right now out of Internet of Everything have to be hyper-aware, predictive, agile. Move fast as they collect information and analytics and look at all that data so that they can adapt in real time. That's how innovation is getting accelerated. So let's talk about all these three pillars in reference to people, process, data, and things. What's an example of people in an agile environment? I believe the British created the whole hierarchical structure of bureaucracy that we continue to live in even in corporate America. There is this structure where each of us reports up into that pyramid. In IOE, if you've got to be agile, you've got to unbundle the traditional teaming structures, facilitate access to expertise at the point of the business need, not in headquarters. I'm challenging status quo because these are some dramatic changes that needs to happen in order to really move into the digital era. Let's take an example of process. You bring analysis to bear closer to the point of business need. It's not about business intelligence 5 years ago where you collected data all together in a central location and looked at historical data. It's about having data in a store on how much traffic is in the store in real time and how many people are needed at the checkout counter or how much stock out is there where there are no longer Coke cans left on the shelf. So the analysis have to happen on the store, not 20 days later on what happened in the past. What about data? Focus on what will happen versus what is happening. It's got to be predictive. As another example for things, connect the dark assets through the machine-to-machine connections. Joseph Bradley, my colleague, who's a thought leader of our company, always says, the value of Internet of Everything is to light up dark assets. And I'll talk to you about it. But think about lighting up assets that can no longer be, that need to be monetized and to remove friction. Wherever there is friction, you remove the friction, you create new value, and you create new value in terms of customer satisfaction, but you also create new value to your bottom line and value at stake. Now let's make it clear, let's give it more realism in reference to financial services and retail. These are concepts that I shared with you. Value at stake, numbers that can impact the bottom line of your company. What will it take for a company to become more agile, predictive, hyper-aware, and what some of the companies are doing, especially in the financial services and retail space, and some of the studies we've done in these two verticals as an example. Keep in mind, we have done 61 use cases, so we are across multiple verticals, and I opted to use this vertical. So if we want to think about a frictionless experience, how many of you, and I want a raise of hands, feel really good that your financial portfolio is completely optimized, and whether you're in the watching the Warriors basketball game or sitting on a beach, you can reach out to your financial advisor at any time, any place, day or night. Anyone in the room? Nobody. Because only 0.5% of the world, the richest, have that access. There's friction here. And the friction is that I, Manjula Talreja, have to abide by either walking into the financial institution in the hours that they are available, into one of the branches, or call my financial advisor when he or she is available. And there's a friction. And what has Wealthfront done? They have actually removed that friction and created new value at stake. We're using a combination of analytics, software, crowdsourcing, etc. You can have access to your portfolio and optimize it real time and actually drive as much optimized portfolio as possible. Here's the value at stake. You're taking a dark asset of that friction that you have and lighting it up. Here's another example, a company called Acorns. You know, it's interesting. Today I walked into the coffee shop across from my hotel, and I picked up a cup of tea and a croissant. It was $5.05. And when I'm traveling, the wallet gets really heavy. So I take my change out, dump it in the bowl in my dresser, and walk out the door. So what happened today? I gave them $6, and they gave me 95 cents back. And that change is a dark asset. And what has Acorn done? Acorn is it basically takes your debit and from your credit card, all that change that's left over for all the payments that you're doing, round it up, and as soon as it reaches $5, they start investing that for you. It's a dark asset. I got bowls of change, and my friction is I've got to take that change, I've got to put it into those old-fashioned, you know, paper things of 25 cents and 1 penny. Then I got to walk into a Wells Fargo when it's open and convert it into dollars. Here you're getting money to work the minute it's over $5. And I probably do that in one day. And actually, when I'm standing in line, and I feel that in New York City and I feel it in Silicon Valley, if I dig into my purse to pull out change, the people behind me are getting impatient because but I got to get my money to work. This is a dark asset that is getting lit up. Here's another example. At least as I travel around the world, I never seem to have the right amount of money to give a tip to somebody who's done a really good service when I've landed in the middle of the night in some part of the world, and I walk into the hotel and they're so courteous because I don't have the local currency at the time I need it. Tiply is a technology and an application that does facial recognition, that I can take a picture of that person and pay the tip into this so that the right person in the right currency gets the right tip. These are some intriguing companies that are taking dark assets that we had never thought about in the financial institution. And my financial institution doesn't provide me that. Here's an opportunity. So what did Cisco do to look at this opportunity? We surveyed 7,000 people across 12 countries, emerging countries and advanced countries, United States inclusive of Canada, United States, Germany, France, etc., emerging countries like Brazil, India, China, Russia, etc. 75% of the people said they would move out of their current financial institution if they provided a frictionless life in action. The kind of things I talked to you about, a balanced portfolio, optimized portfolio. Balance is a subjective word. So what is frictionless life in action in a bank, as an example, as some banks are starting to adopt this? And they're using the digital era. So when I'm buying a house in the United States, just the emotional area of buying the house is stressful enough. But the experience of getting a mortgage is even more difficult. And think about removing friction, where I have a phone call with a mortgage advisor or a FaceTime video call with a mortgage advisor. And based on my mobile device, if I walk into a branch, which you see as branch recognition here, I walk into a screen and the exact same person based on who I am and who I've talked to before shows up on the screen to provide me a virtual mortgage advice so that I don't have to repeat what I repeated to the earlier person. This can be done in a digital era. There's mobility. So my phone's available. I've got data because financial institutions are getting a lot of data about who I am, what my portfolio is. Am I a platinum customer? Am I a diamond customer? I am a nobody customer? And that kind of service can be created. Think about walking into a bank where you're standing in lines and there's a queue, but they've been able to detect who you are. Where some of the banks in the world outside of the United States are doing something interesting. Most banks are in strip malls or in larger malls where there are other stores in the bank. You walk in, recognizes who you are. There's a line of about 7 or 8 people. You don't know how long the wait is. Imagine a push of an application onto your phone saying you have a 7-minute wait. And here's a coupon for you to go to the Starbucks next door for $5 to go help yourself to a croissant and a cup of coffee. Bloomingdale's does that in Silicon Valley. The other day, I was getting a suit hemmed up, and they said it'd take 15 minutes. It wasn't ready. I walked out, and next thing I knew, on my cell phone, a $5 coupon came into my cell phone to go use in the Starbucks nearby. So we actually did a full analysis in terms of what impact do some of these processes for a financial institution mean for about a $10 billion company? And what is the value at stake? I talked to you about video-based, mortgage advisors, branch recognition, mobile payments. And we looked at each one of them and what opportunity it provides for a $10 billion company. And it's pretty significant. 14.5% growth opportunity for the bank. That's significant in today's times. And we deducted $77 million of what it'll cost them to implement this because everything costs. There is an opportunity of value at stake for a $10 billion company to drive $392 million of growth. These are dark assets. You retain your customer. You give an experience to the customer that they're really looking for because you've got so much information about them. Insights is today's currency. Context is king. When I walked in, the bank knows I'm looking for a mortgage. Think about those 75% I talked about customers that may hop over to another bank or a non-banking institution, as non-banking institutions are providing some of these services. Let's go to the retail side. And retail is very complex right now because I know my daughter doesn't walk into, she lives 5 minutes from Google in Mountain View, California, and she doesn't walk into a grocery store anymore. A Google Express van drops off 6 bananas when she needs 6 bananas. And when Google over time is going to have these drones dropping off food or whatever you want into your homes, they're collecting a huge amount of insight from my daughter in terms of what she shops and what she needs. So what are the Walmarts and the Whole Foods and the Safeways of the world doing? You don't have those kind of insights when you walk into the store. The Safeway down the street from my house does not know that I actually buy just organic food from the organic fruit section versus the non-organic food. But a Google would. It also doesn't know that they're running out to a great precision on the last 25% of the Coke Zero mini cans that I like versus the large cans that I like. So retailers, whether they are coffee shops, big box retailers, are doing quite a bit of extensive work with Cisco and the likes and an ecosystem of partners to change that. So whether it is putting sensors in the parking lot to see the traffic that's about to come into their store, remember predictive, what is going to happen rather than what is happening, or whether it's location-based services, or it is high-quality cameras, or if it's Wi-Fi tags on your carts, or it is giving a devices like that to all the supervisors to see what is the traffic like in the various aisles so that they can put more people on the checkout aisles when the traffic suddenly picks up, predicting that more people are going to be going out at the cash out, and yet managing cost. They can't have all the aisles loaded up. With the cost it takes them, they'd rather have folks in the back room loading up the stock. How do they balance all of that? And there's a lot happening in this space about bringing together what's online and insights that the Googles, the Amazons, the Apples have versus the brick and mortars. For those of you who are as old enough as me, some of this happened during the 1990s, during the e-commerce era, right? Some companies survived, some didn't, some did a combination. This is at a faster speed, and it is the convergence of many more factors than just one. So think about an exponential change rather than just what we went through in the 1990s. So let's talk about a big box retailer. The retailer, they look at this as their competitive advantage and therefore did not want us to share this information. They worked very closely with Cisco and some other vendors as well, and an ecosystem of partners. They went through, they said, which opportunities do we want to zero in on? So we worked with them across about 20 use cases. Where do they want to take their dark assets and light them up? And based on the work that we did with them, they focused on two. Number one is stock out on their shelves. Current systems are not very precise. So when they put an alert into their supply chain system with a BIC, sometimes that information, a lot of times that information is not precise. And so when I need my Coke, which is that mini cans, and it's not at Safeway, I'll go down the street to a CVS or a Target to go pick it up. They don't want that to happen. They want an alarm to go off, an alert to go off, when the stock is at a probably 25%. Because stock out has a 8 to 12% impact on their top line or their bottom line. That's a very significant number, 8 to 12%. So retailers watch that very, very tightly, especially since it's a low margin business. So what we did with them is we actually have patented video cameras that are precisely to watch out for as the shelf is getting empty. As you may know, Cisco has acquired quite a few analytics companies. We combined video analytics with it, and we partnered with some software companies that have more precision of this kind of information related to their supply chain in order to drive greater specificity. The second use case that was important to them, which I've mentioned, is the cash out register, where from their cost perspective as well as customer experience perspective, they want to real time know where are the lines that are going to be there and how many checkout counter cash registers they need to get loaded up. So they have an associate tablet where it's giving them that data, because sometimes these stores are so large that you're not able to see with all the obstruction of all the items by visually where the lines are longer, where the lines are building up, and through the associate tablet, they're able to view that and immediately put the number of people that are required. As a result of this, they've raised their revenue just with 2 use cases, 68 million, reduced cost of labor because they've been able to balance the front and the back office of loading things to the front end cash register by 94 million, and providing a completely new customer experience. So this is happening for real right now. Similarly, a global coffee house chain is using technology like video and analytics to figure out bulk rate. And bulk rate, for those who don't know in the retail industry, is number of customers leaving a queue or a line over the number of customers entering a queue. And if people get frustrated waiting for a coffee at a coffee shop, the coffee shop owners don't know. Is it because they haven't trained the people right? Is it the timing of the day? Is it the gender and age? Who gets more impatient when? Is it the millennials? Is it the Generation X? Is it Generation Y? When do people start leaving the line? How long is that line? Does the bulk rate increase with the wait time? With very precise video analytics and video cameras, you can find that out versus the more generic ones that were earlier. And again, this coffee shop has changed their overall understanding of what they need to do and take the dock assets and remove the friction that the customers are feeling walking into these coffee shops. I hope I gave you a good idea about what we are talking about, Internet of Everything. And the question is, irrespective of which company you are in, are you seeing that there is an opportunity for your company to tap into as part of that $19 trillion? Businesses must become hyper-aware, predictive, agile to become IOE companies. Are you seeing that cultural change? Are you seeing the change of the technology? Or are you making those changes of process, people, data, and things that is required, or just the technology, or just focusing on technology? And are you ready to transform now to capture the value of IOE? And the reason I ask that is because it's the speed at which things are happening today, and the competitive landscape is not alone, waiting for you to change. This is the new world of the digital era, and my question to you is, are you ready? Thank you so much. Hope I've given you some food for thought.